Hello, friends. Welcome back to another edition of No Cap Room. My name is Jake Fisher. I am the senior NBA reporter at Yahoo Sports, and I'm joined, as always, by my man, your man, everyone's man, senior NBA writer at Yahoo Sports, Dan Devine. What is up?
Beautiful day here in Brooklyn, New York. And Jake, I need to know, what were the bike riding vibes like?
It is a beautiful day. I will say, I left the apartment around 9:30 in the morning, and it was way windier than I thought it would be. It was one of those rides where I was like shivering in the shady streets until I hit like my first bridge, and then we broke into a full sweat, and we're good to go, man. Yeah. What did you do with your morning as we record this here on Thursday at 12:40 Eastern time?
Pretty classic dad vibes of prepping laundry before we go away for the long weekend for Memorial Day to my in-laws' house, because my daughters need to know that they have the certain exact right dresses, and also that they're even though they're going to sleep in their beds for just one more night before we go, that they need to have the right sheets on, the right unicorn sheets and the right rainbow sheets. So a whole, that, and then of course preparing for this wonderful podcast, No Cap Room, where we are in the middle of or near the end of the conference finals in both rounds.
Yeah, I'd say we're past the midpoint, being that one finals was mercifully a sweep, and this one
might be merciless if you're a Laker fan, but
it might be. This one tonight could end in Boston, game 5.
Yep.
Game 5 in Boston, Thursday night, 8:30. On today's show, we will definitely get to that. We'll talk about a new direction for the Washington Wizards, Carmelo Anthony's legacy following his retirement, and just a bunch of head coaching carousel stuff, as I have some news that I don't know if will still be unscooped by the time this airs, but right now it's been untouched. So we're trying it out. We're saving it. We'll see if we can drop a nice rumor mill teaser for the show when it drops at some time late afternoon here. But first, because we are a big media company, like every big media company, we're going to talk about the Lakers. And as someone put it to me, we have like a month left to talk about the Nuggets. So yeah, I think it's
right.
We'll take some time to bury what was a team that I never believed in. So I feel vindicated a bit in that. But no, I think it's also interesting how context shapes all these endings of seasons, being that there was the Lakers were an overtime away from playing Denver in the first round. And if they get swept against the Nuggets there, which again, this is a total hypothetical big if, that's completely neglecting that the Lakers pretty much had their way with Memphis and Golden State, two teams that were many a favorite to compete against Denver. So, but they get to the Western Conference Finals. It is obviously a sour taste to not take a game off of Denver. LeBron gives his cryptic, maybe I'm going to retire, even though no one believes him at all. So I guess I'll end the intro there, Dan, and just say, what is the first thing that comes to mind for you when talking about this end of the Lakers season, and maybe with a hint towards looking forward to this offseason, or just what pieces we saw that they can put together again and reassemble for the 23-24 campaign?
Well, yeah, I think the first thing is, I understand why many people would approach LeBron's post-game comments from the perspective of he's clearly playing four-dimensional chess. And so him going onto the podium after the game and talking about that he's got a lot to think about must be about a way to hold Rob Pelinka's feet to the fire. It must be a way to indicate that he wants X, Y, or Z move. It must be a way to, to make sure to divert attention away from the Nuggets and put it on himself, as if, again, as we talked about in the national media landscape, we ever need a reason to talk more about the Lakers as opposed to focusing on Denver. I understood why people had that reaction, but it seemed way more likely to me that it was like a guy who was exhausted and emotionally wrung out like a rag.
Yeah.
Who also on that day, that morning, the guy he had been one of his closest friends in the basketball world, who he'd been associated with for the entirety of his prep to pros basketball life, retired. And so now he's the only guy left from his draft class. He just went out and played 47 minutes and 56 seconds of one of his best game of this entire postseason. And it wasn't even enough to put a scratch on the Nuggets. And so in that moment on a foot that maybe needed surgery 3 months ago, to be like, I rolled the boulder all the way up the hill and now it's back down at the bottom. Maybe I just don't want to do this anymore. Like, that felt like a really human and emotionally understandable thing for me to hear from a person. So when people were like, what's the chess move here? I'm like, maybe the dude's just tired.
Yeah.
Maybe an older gentleman is kind of bummed out and feels a little bit sad that about like, I'm the only guy left and I'm really tired and my foot really hurts and I don't know if I want to do this anymore. That felt more relatable to me than like anything else anybody has said in a post-game press conference, except for, I guess, Michael Malone being like, why isn't everybody giving us more credit all the time? I also feel that sometimes too, Michael. I understand. But yeah, I mean, so that part of it, I get where it comes from. But I think sometimes in the search for what the broader superstructure narrative of all of it is, we might lose sight of the fact that like a person might have a personal reaction to something. And that's kind of what I thought about after that.
You're just being empathetic to fellow old men, in the basketball world. That's pretty much what it is.
That's exactly right. But
Yeah.
as far as the spin it forward component, the fact that comes after a game where Kyrie Irving again is courtside at a Laker game and where Trae Young again is courtside at a Laker game, and
they're just two guys hanging out watching hoops. What do you mean? That's no big deal. There's no attention. There's no ESPN camera that will happen to hover over them with a chyron spelling out their connections to LeBron. That's not going to happen.
Of course not. Preposterous to presume that. I mean, it would have been funny if, like, after the game ended, they just threw a ball into the middle of the court, had them meet and say, all right, 1-on-1 to 11, whoever wins becomes the point guard of this team next year. But the thing I'm fascinated by is, and I know you wrote about the Lakers offseason at Yahoo Sports, just went up before we started recording. The idea,
probably tweet that out, right?
Good idea. Maybe not during the show. I mean, let's be professional broadcasters, but the idea that the Lakers had a recipe that led them to a championship in 2020. They diverted from that path to bring in Russell Westbrook because they felt like they needed more ball handling and shot creation, especially when you weren't going to have LeBron available or if AD was hurt or whatever. So they traded depth and rotation players who play defense and shot for a star ball handler. It didn't work. It went disastrously. They shifted back to, and then they were like, we have to undo that. They did that and traded the star for like half a rotation of guys who could dribble, pass, shoot, and defend. They got to the conference finals again. And now the answer is like, well, but what if they had a ball handler who could shoot, a high volume shot creator? Is that really the way we need to go? And so the back and forth of what the Lakers need and what the recipe is, I think that's going to be fascinating to watch Pelinka kind of navigate, because he says in the exit interview, our intention is to continue to build around the young core. And Kyle Kuzma immediately goes, I've heard that before, with like 5 crying emojis. And yeah, I mean, that's the way it works. That's the high cost of living in a place like LA. What got you there might not necessarily be what needs to come next.
I think, LeBron's been looking for a point guard engine so he doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting. Maybe we've said this on the show before. I don't remember because I've been talking about basketball all day, every day for like 6 straight months now. Right. But he's been looking for that type of guy since Cleveland. I'll never forget, it was that 17-18 season, I believe, that last year in Cleveland where they do the Kyrie trade, bring back Isaiah Thomas with the whole hip controversy. And I remember sitting on the Knicks bench during like morning shoot around at MSG where LeBron was like working on post moves with some Cavs assistant coach. And I was talking to Channing Frye about, and because I was talking, that team had Derrick Rose, and in addition to Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder and Dwayne Wade, and all these guys like Channing Frye who had been on the Knicks, who were like Eastern Conference playoff rivals to LeBron. And now they were like all on his team. So I was kind of just doing a story about that theme. And one of the things that came up from Channing was like, the guy just knows how to throw the ball exactly where you want it in your shooting pocket and remembers it for every single teammate. And LeBron like looked over at me and he was talking to the coach, but he was talking to my recording device by yelling stuff like, I wasn't supposed to be a point guard this year. Like we were down here. We were on the block. We were doing this. We're doing, one dribble over the left shoulder, one dribble over the right shoulder. Like he was not ready to be, demanding and controlling all the offense. And that was 2017-18, quick carry the one. That was, 5 years ago. So like, I think I can understand why the overreaction was there. I think you see it And with this team being that D'Lo unfortunately kind of disappeared from the fray of things when the Nuggets series really came to a head.
Yeah, he just couldn't play in that series. Like he had a target on his back the entire time on defense, and he wasn't making enough shots to make it worth anybody's while.
Yeah, but I'll say, like, the thing I thought about a lot after my conversation, I talked with way too many people for that story that came out today. But, we're always trying to be diligent and double check all the cap minutia that I definitely am not an expert at. And I need to quadruple reference it with 7 different people from different teams to make sure that
Right.
one guy isn't screwing me over for reading something wrong. But like, for the Lakers to get back to the conference final stage, to hopefully, from a Lakers perspective, like, avenge this loss and get to the championship, they're going to have to get to the playoffs too. And someone like D'Angelo Russell can absolutely be like a pure offensive floor general engine guy for the regular season when you're just running around the country and playing 4 games in 5 nights and need someone who can be a pick and roll threat. And Austin Reeves can do it too. And then the Lakers, as much as any team, are probably, from my estimation and understanding, going to be looking at things from an 82 versus 16 game lens as well. So it's really about figuring out how they can get over that, that challenge of wanting LeBron to not be on the ball every single play, not have to play 48 minutes to really make sure the offense is flowing when there's a matchup that D'Lo can't play. So it's going to be tough though, because, like, barring a sign and trade for D'Angelo Russell that brings back someone who's better, or some type of pre-June 29th, which is the guarantee date for Mo Bamba, the guarantee date for Jared Vanderbilt, which, I mean, I'd be shocked if they don't guarantee him, and then the team option for Malik Beasley. If they can combine Beasley and Mo Bamba's salary, so like around 26, with something around the draft and the 17th pick, or even without the 17th pick, just when trade calls are a buzzing that week before the draft and during that night. And I think I might write about this at some point too. Like, the week after the draft ends, I think we could see some unusual amount of trade. I don't think it'll be crazy, like, superstar movement, but we could see some, like, 2-for-1 salary, aggregation, where, like, you're putting, like, if it's the Clippers turning 2 of their bench players into one guy, to try to kind of rejigger their books a bit before the new CBA rules come into play. Like, the Lakers don't really have a mechanism to get a true difference maker outside of the non-taxpayer mid-level, which is going to be about $12.2 million. And I don't want to start listing names, because I don't want people to think this is what I'm saying, players who want to play for the Lakers, or the Lakers are targeting them. But, like, this one name I'll throw out, as I think from conversations I had, would be like the best caliber player that the Lakers could be hoping for at that mid-level, is someone like Harrison Barnes. And Harrison Barnes is a good player, but I don't know if the Lakers were a Harrison Barnes away from not being swept against Denver to then, beating Denver. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I don't have, like, delusions of grandeur. I don't think the Lakers do. I think they're confident though. I think, from my understanding, the Lakers were 18-8 after the trade deadline, and, like, are very curious what this group could do from a training camp through a whole season. They're happy to finally have some, like, younger talent in Rui and Austin Reeves. And those will be their main 2 priorities, and the rest will kind of be like a game of what if, depending on how the other dominoes fall.
Yeah, the silver lining kind of takeaways are, you reaffirmed the proof of the concept of, if we have LeBron and AD healthy come the playoffs, we have a chance against anybody. You established that Austin Reeves was not, like a fluky folk hero kind of guy. Like, that's a real player who does real NBA things against drop coverage in the pick and roll, can handle himself defensively, can hold up in a playoff context. I think, and one of the sort of interesting big blinking light stats to me was Austin Reeves in the Western Conference Finals went 14 for 25 from 3. Every other Laker combined went 23 for 81. So 28% for the rest of the team. Reeves well over 50%. So when the lights were brightest, he answered the call, right? He was somebody that you can feel confident or feel more comfortable building around, including as actually a legitimate part of that young core. Hachimura, I think, is an interesting player, because he was there. He showed up in each round and was valuable in multiple matchups, but has never been a regular season player like that. So that's the question. It's weird. Like, is he more of a 16 game player than an 82 game player? And when you're looking to fill out that road, maybe he is, which is kind of wild to say. I mean, I'm sure every Wizards fan has been watching this going like, I can't believe that now this is what's showing up for him. This is how he's rising to this occasion when many other lower tier occasions he was not rising to for 5 years. But
it's pretty remarkable. Before I have some close friends with the Wizards, one of them in particular, and throughout the playoff run, and I really liked Rui coming out of college, and I remember like just picking the pieces together. I kind of figured out he was going to be available at 9, and like texted my buddy, and he was like, "Oh, like that'd be pretty sweet. Like we don't know if he'll be there." And then like was just so disappointed in him the last half decade or whatever it's been, and obviously they moved off of him. So as he's making every single shot against Memphis in the first round, and I think he first went off against Minnesota maybe in the plan. Like I've just been texting this friend being like, man, is Rui the greatest player of all time? Like what's happening here?
Yeah, if there's one thing that people with the Wizards need, it's more trolling about how things have not necessarily gone their way. But maybe that's on its way. But another sort of wild stat, just from having looked into this, the valiant LeBron effort we mentioned in Game 4, played all but 4 seconds, 40 points, 10 rebounds, 9 assists. It is the 6th time in LeBron's playoff career that he's gone for at least 49-9 in a playoff game, and his teams are only 3-3. He's lost 3 of those games. Yeah, I mean, and which I guess when you sort of take a step back from it, it makes a little bit of sense. If you need him to do that much, then it's probably because nobody else is doing anything. And so the losses were this one, and then also 2015 finals against the Warriors when it was basically Kyrie broke his knee, Love had been out. There was just like nobody else to play with there. And then in that Eastern Conference final, that Cavaliers team where he wasn't supposed to be playing point guard, they made it all the way to the Eastern Conference finals against that like first young Celtics team, the one that Kyrie was not on and Gordon Hayward was hurt, but it was Tatum, Brown, Horford, etc., Terry Rozier, in Game 2 of that series. So LeBron having these incredible performances only to be to fall short. Thanks perhaps to the supporting cast, thanks perhaps to the successfulness or how high quality the opposition is. Maybe that's all stuff that weighs on you when you're after the game thinking about what your future might entail.
There you go. I'm curious what future we have in store for us in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Segway King, ladies and gentlemen, Jake Fisher, the People's Insider and number 1 in your heart Segway wise.
Game 5's tonight, so I don't want to go like too in depth on what we're going to see at TD Garden because there'll only be a couple hours for our listeners to hear that. But just speaking more macro about this series, let's start with Miami. In that, I've definitely heard some people mention this to me. Jared Greenberg was talking about this on Monday's show of Good Word with Goodwill about like, oh boy, is this going to potentially be a roadmap for teams to maybe kind of just slog their way through the regular season, and it just becomes like the NFL where all you got to do is make it, and then you can turn on the switch. I don't think that's really plausible because we've seen so many teams fall short of doing that. Even like the LeBron James Cavaliers in 17-18, I think in 16-17 it was the team. Yeah, after they won the title. Where, I mean, they partied hard summer 2016, man. The Cavs were like...
That was shirtless JR, yeah.
That was shirtless JR. They were going to Ibiza and partying through the night. I mean, the stories that I would love to one day tell that I would love to get on the record from Richard Jefferson and company. They appear to be legendary. And then the 16-17 season, they just kind of had this whole thing like, oh, we're going to flip the switch in the playoffs. And, they never... from people on that team, like they never really revved it all the way up, if you will. Golden State tried to basically do that this year. I just don't think it's going to be very easy for a lot of teams to recreate the path Miami is doing. And I say this to set this up for you. Like, how did they do this? What has been the change that this team goes from even like when they lost the Atlanta Hawks in that opening game of the play-in tournament, they barely got past our Bulls, and then now they've just become this absolute juggernaut.
Yeah. So it's a little bit like everything all at once, right? There's a little bit of a bunch of different stuff. One thing is the quality of the Heat this season was maybe not necessarily indicative of what the quality of that roster is and has been. This was the number one seed last year. It was the best shooting team in the NBA last year. It made it to Game 7 of the conference finals last year. They had a bunch of injuries, guys in and out at different times of the lineup throughout the regular season, more starting lineups than any other team in the NBA this season. Spoelstra was kind of just like constantly in the lab trying to figure out how to get the best lineup on the floor. It didn't really all come together. I think that there is an aspect of you face your mortality down in the second play-in game and going like, how the hell did we get here? And that like Bam Adebayo has talked about that, other members of the Heat talked about it, that really locked them into a different level. Shooting variance, it's like a boring thing to talk about, but it's the truth. They were an elite shooting team last season. They were bad all during the regular season, 27th in the NBA in three-point accuracy as a team, shot 34.8% from deep. That's up to 38.8% in the playoffs. And that changes your life. If those 4 percentage points represent a dramatic overhaul in the quality of your half-court offense, how effective you are in transition, how teams have to run out at you and defend on the line, opening opportunities for guys like Caleb Martin to suddenly blow past a closeout, get into the lane, get a layup, get a dunk, get a drop-off pass to a teammate, good to great kind of shots, because if they're worried about you hitting the three-pointer, it creates more opportunities for creation. And you've got just a handful of guys that are all shooting above their regular season levels. Martin, Gabe Vincent, Kevin Love was hurt for most of the season, had a messed up thumb, and it was throwing off his shot. That came back around in the first couple of rounds of the playoffs. Duncan Robinson went from out of the rotation and mothballs to suddenly becoming a valuable part of the offense again. Jimmy went from not taking any threes to suddenly taking them and making them. That roster-wide change completely shifted what the ceiling for that offense could be. When you combine it with like the nuts and bolts stuff that they do, better player movement, everybody's constantly cutting with a purpose, full speed, running into their actions and their sets, spacing to make sure that the rotations are as far apart as possible for a defense. We saw that time and again in the Knicks series, where the Knicks, it just seemed like they were constantly leaving guys alone. Some of that was inattentive off-ball defense, but a lot of it was you're just far away because the guys are really far away. Jimmy, obviously, on another planet, reminding people again, maybe the best two-way player in the NBA, if not certainly on a very short list in that conversation, and one of the rare players who steps his level of play up in the postseason as opposed to seeing it go down. You get reintroduced to sort of the value of Bam Adebayo as a guy who can check every box, even if he's not scoring 25, 30 every night. I wrote about that a little bit earlier this week at Yahoo Sports, that sense that he's kind of the embodiment of the like whatever's necessary, whatever's required spoism that Eric Spoelstra says all the time on both ends of the floor for them. It's just on and on and on, more efficient all over the place. A quieter one that you feel a little bit, mean mentioning, Tyler Hero getting hurt. It removed a really important half-court offensive piece for them. It also removed their most glaring defensive liability. And suddenly the rotation that they're playing is all guys that are kind of able to stay in front of somebody or, guard their own yard a little bit and at least have the size and the competitiveness on that end to be able to hold up. So you don't play any more defensive liabilities, or at least many glaring ones. Everybody's shooting better. Your best two players go up a level. And you catch the Bucks with the Giannis thing going on. You catch the Bucks in a moment of existential crisis. You catch a Knicks team that can't shoot. You catch a Celtics team that can be shaky down the stretch. Like, you take advantage of every opportunity. You find yourselves here. So whether this means that they're going to go on and advance tonight or in 2 nights or in 3 or whatever remains to be seen. But the Heat are kind of the epitome of everything going right at the right time, making your own luck and taking advantage of it. And I think that, to your point about this is maybe not a replicable thing for a team to just be bad, suddenly get in the tournament, and then all of a sudden it's all good. The Heat have been better than what their record was during the regular season. Even though there wasn't any indication that this was coming from what their regular season looked like, the quality of the players on that roster was there. So if you've got, a couple of all NBA caliber dogs and then a bunch of role players around them that can do multiple things, then maybe you could win, matchup by matchup in the postseason. But the Heat are maybe particularly well suited to do it, and we're seeing that play out.
All right, flipping it to the Celtics. Obviously, they took Game 4 pretty decisively. I mean, I think they've got more than the capability of taking Game 5 on their home floor and sending this thing back down to Miami. It would be they'd be the first team ever to overcome a 3-0 series deficit and win 4 straight. So let's just work on the assumption that's not going to happen. But I want to.
They're not going to be the 1 in 150. They're not going to suddenly be that first one.
I'm not getting my hopes up for them. That's just where things are. I'm a realist. I'm a pragmatist. But that being said, like, is there anything you saw in that road win at Miami that maybe gave a clearer roadmap to turning this thing around? Like, is there a chance? Are you telling me there's a chance?
Right. That was the headline for our guy Ben Rohrback's piece. So you're saying there's a chance from Dumb and Dumber? Yeah, I think that they looked like the Celtics, for lack of a better term. Like this all season long, this was a team that generated a ton of threes, made a ton of threes, and was able to be a sort of smothering defensive unit. And that just wasn't there through the first 3 games of this series. There are bellwether players for them. If Al Horford gets a couple of his of shots to go down early, that seems to bode really well. Marcus Smart was kind of invisible in the first half, but made a couple of shots coming right out of halftime, and that was what allowed Boston to kind of get on a roll. Every time they took a punch, they were able to respond in kind. That's what we're used to from the Celtics, and the Heat had just kind of taken that away from them and gotten the game on their terms in the first 3 games. This one changed that changed dramatically. Tatum being aggressive and assertive in the fourth quarter was something we hadn't seen for the first 3. I think he hadn't had a basket in the fourth quarter in the first 3 games. Really, kept going to him late in game 4, got him going, and that changed a lot. I mean, and the shift in rotation from Malcolm, big minutes for Malcolm Brogdon, who we learned, I believe it was Jared Weiss at The Athletic reported, he's playing through a torn tendon or an arm injury that's maybe impacting his shot. Maybe, it's a pain management thing. We don't know exactly what it's going to manifest in, but has not been very good in this series. To more minutes for Grant Williams, who made himself into a national punching bag with the, talking smack to Jimmy Butler, but has played really well in this series and provides that sort of physicality and shooting. That shift has really seemed to bode well for Boston.
Yeah, the phrase you're looking for was poking the bear. You got
right
crucified for poking the bear.
It's a loaded phrase in this postseason, though, where we're still hearing the echoes of Dylan Brooks's quiet absence or exit from the postseason.
Yeah,
the thundering echo of nothing as he exited the postseason.
Yeah, which, as in looking at Lakers cap stuff the last couple of days, I started to hear some trickles of other free agency mongerings, and it just made me think. Just because I'm always trying to think about how like the attention economy will be, what the narrative cycle will be, like what will be a story, what should we be ahead of, blah, blah, blah. Like where Dylan Brooks does sign in free agency is going to get heightened attention compared to like even like Fred VanVleet. Like it's just,
right.
It's going to be, he's going to get an outsized spotlight just because of everything that unfolded. But back.
So you don't think he's going to go join Dwight in Taiwan? You don't think that's coming next for him? In spite of all the memes that immediately followed Dylan Brooks' exit?
I do not think so. No, I think he will be paid quite handsomely to be a team's lead perimeter defender, at least in the regular season. Just one last note on Boston before we take a quick break. Winning tonight, winning game 6 and forcing game 7. I mean, being the only team to ever overcome a 3-0 deficit would obviously, all those things would help Joe Mazzulla and the narrative machine that we were just referring to and getting the monkey off his back. I wrote about it earlier this week. I just want to say, like, things could change. I mean, personal things could happen behind the scenes, but if the Celtics make a change at head coach, and I know a lot of it comes from just a media and a local population that has the kinetic energy to always get angry about sports things and want someone to be thrown under the bus going down the Mass Pike. I understand why people would be up in arms about just the way Miami really outclassed Boston through those first 3 games. But I'd be so surprised if a change does happen there, being that we had already known that Boston was trying to bring on someone such as Frank Vogel and Jay Larranaga back before the season started. And Frank Vogel's back on their radar as someone to add to the staff. Steven Silas, we saw him photographed at a Celtics practice. He's definitely being considered or expected or whatever the hedgy language to talk about him potentially joining the team is, to be a veteran, lead assistant or something to that degree under Mazzulla. And they didn't hire a 34-year-old whose highest level of head coaching came at NCAA D1 AA, and never been on the front of a bench at the NBA before, like expecting him to be perfect.
Right.
Everyone I've talked to around Boston has spoken so highly of him, has been behind him. I know there was someone who went on national TV and said that, they were never able to recover from losing Ime Udoka. Like, I do think that was a huge, huge, huge hit. And a lot of players and a lot of the foibles of this team's like mental fortitude and stuff like that, everyone really did credit to him, to the point where when I was writing about Boston during last year's playoff run, when I was at Bleacher Report, I started thinking to myself here at my desk over there, like, man, are these guys all just giving me the same talking points? Because, like, it's such a cliche how much Ime holds everyone accountable and blah, blah, blah. But, like, that's just apparently what the truth was. So, like, he definitely was a big loss for them, I'd say, in terms of that, like, element of their culture. But I also think, and have seen these players be supportive and follow Joe Mazzulla's lead. And I don't think Boston was expecting him to come out and be the second coming of Red Auerbach immediately. So I just say all that to say, until I hear something of the contrary, and not just, people slamming the table for him to, have his head get rolled, I'm expecting him to be back. I think for all those circumstances, the one thing I really do think he has failed on during this postseason run is a bit of like the kind of, I don't want to say arrogance, but like just that the way he's kind of gone at local or at like the press avail stuff of being like, oh, I'm the worst coach ever. And like, you guys don't want to ask me about my adjustments. Like I totally get it, because I know from talking to friends on the coaching side, like we were just talking to our producer, John Denara, about this before we recorded, like, there's so much we don't know about what people actually do on the inside and what their actual plan and strategy is, and what players didn't execute and blah, blah, blah. Like, I get why he would feel the need to kind of push back on that type of just easy, low hanging fruit that people grab at in the immediate aftermath of a tough loss. But I think that maybe put the target on his back when columnists have their pen dipped in ink and they need to give something to their editors, and the Celtics are down 3-0 and everyone's mad. Like, I think that maybe helped escalate the pitchforks, or helped raise the pitchforks. But I think he'll be back. Like, right now, Thursday, May 25th at now 1:13 Eastern time, I'm full expecting him to be the Celtics head coach next season. I mean, for the 23-24 campaign. Yeah, regardless of what happens tonight.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, had it gone in a 4-0 sweep where they get embarrassed again in game 4, maybe that changes. But the fact that they got off the mat, fought, and like played a respectable, this is what the Celtics should look like kind of game 4 to get back in the series, spoke well to that. I mean, zoom out from the specific thing here. And yeah, you're talking about a 57-win team that was number 2 in the league in offense, number 2 in the league in defense, best net rating in the league. This is why, by the way, all those analytic models keep saying that the Celtics are still the favorites and all these things, because the underlying numbers, the predicate stuff that goes into it, the weights are all like, they were awesome during the regular season. That's why. And obviously the Heat have been crumpling that up and throwing it away like Jimmy Butler with a stat sheet and that meme all postseason long, but that's why. And you're talking about a 34-year-old head coach. Remember, Brad Stevens, the guy who, according to multiple reports, like is invested in Joe Mazzulla, believes in Joe Mazzulla. Brad Stevens was 36. He
was the one guy who stayed on the coaching staff when Brad Stevens went to the front office and then brought in Ime Udoka.
Yeah, and so there's a connection there. There's an investment in that. There's a belief in that. Brad Stevens was 36 when he got the Celtics job. Mazzulla's younger than that, or Mazzulla's younger than that rather. And so I think if anyone understands the importance of runway for a coach finding himself, it's probably Brad Stevens. Factor in the fact that the aspect that you have mentioned before of you're losing a lot from the staff. You lost guys from the Udoka staff. You lost Will Hardy to the Utah job. You lose Damon Stoudemire to Georgia Tech in the middle of the season. And I'm not sure that anybody replaced those guys during the season, right? So yeah, so there's a brain drain component. There's a you're trying to adjust to a lot of different changes on the fly kind of thing in your first run through it against maybe the best coach in the NBA. And the bigger thing too, and this goes back to what you were saying, the things that we see about what coaches do are who they start, who they play, who they don't play, and whether or not they call timeouts. That's basically what we understand of what their job is. Mazzulla being somebody who there were obvious things that people could ask questions about. Why are they not playing the two big lineup more? Why are they not starting Robert Williams? Why are they not doing this? Why aren't they calling timeouts when they're on the business end of a bad run? Those were when you see those things, just through your TV, you're like, this guy's clearly messing this stuff up. Why is he not doing the right things? That's the top of the iceberg, and we never see what goes on below the water in terms of what a coach does. Even if he's nailing everything below the sea level, we see the stuff on the top, and we're like, this guy's completely blowing it. And maybe, listen, sometimes you do need to call a timeout. One of the big oh wow moments in Game 4 was when things were starting to get unsettled. There was, I believe it was Jaylen Brown was kind of trapped with the ball. He called a timeout. He got onto the court and he called a timeout to say we're going to bail us out of a bad possession. We're going to settle things down. And it was like, oh wow, right. That's an option that's available to you. But that going away from Derek White in the starting lineup, taking away the hunting ground that Jimmy had in terms of the mismatches, going more to Grant Williams as opposed to Brogdon and White and those minutes off the bench. He's learning in real time. He's applying the things that he's learning in real time. Maybe it was too late for this series. We'll find out. But the indicators all suggest this is somebody who has the players' respect, is able to produce a good product, and has some growth opportunity to move forward from it. So could the Celtics have a better head coach? Probably. I mean, yeah, sure. Maybe there are guys who are better at the job and better suited for a championship run right now. But clearly Stevens and the rest of the decision makers there see something more for him in terms of what he could be moving forward. And I think even a sweep probably wouldn't have changed that. But I think getting back into the series certainly, turns down the temperature on that. And we'll see how much further Mazzulla and the rest of the Celtics can take it now.
There you go. All right. We'll be back after a quick break to talk more about the coaching rumors swirling around the NBA. And the Washington Wizards have a new chief executive and potentially a new direction for the first time in a long, long time. Stay with us. Welcome back to No Cap Room, where late Wednesday night, the Washington Wizards agreed to bring on Clippers general manager Michael Winger to take over as the president of Monumental Sports, which oversees the Wizards, the WNBA Mystics, and the G League Capital City Go-Go. I will say this to start the ball rolling here on the Wizards subject, in that there were a lot of people who wanted this job, back channeling and whispering, and I think because a couple of factors. It's in a pretty decent market. DC isn't exactly New York or Boston or LA, but pretty decent market in terms of, they've got all four sports, massive population, blah, blah, blah. But also that owner Ted Leonsis has very much exhibited patience and support of his lead executives. I don't remember off the top of my head how long Ernie Grunfeld was running the show, but it was for
63 years.
It's for well over a decade. And then after a search and whatever, and their process in 2019 lands on Tommy Shepard, who was an underling of Ernie Grunfeld. He got 5 full years to run the show, or 4.5, whatever it amounted to. So that staying power alone, when the biggest lesson I think a lot of GMs end up learning when their first GM job doesn't work out is maybe I need to pick a different ownership group to align myself with. I think that type of steadiness was attractive off the jump. But the challenge was going to be that if Ted Leonsis would continue to require that the Wizards compete for the playoffs no matter what. And there was someone with the team who told me at a certain point when, the process was still in the throes of it, and like honestly, well before we had actually learned that Trajan Langdon and Michael Winger were the only two people that I've been able to determine that's been reported have actually had like in-person sit-down interviews with the franchise leadership. But someone with the Wizards said to me, I think if the right strategist can get in there with Ted and show him like a detailed plan and a point of attack that gets this team to like real competitive levels, that has the floor of just being a perennial playoff team, where a rebuild is the method to do so, then this Wizards person said to me they thought Leonsis and his leadership structure would be approving of that. So when I saw that Josh Robbins at The Athletic last night reported that Winger has ownership approval for a rebuild, I mean, so far for the last couple years, the only real idea of trading Bradley Beal has been if Bradley Beal was going to request to trade himself. And he's been close. He's definitely thought about it. His waffling and wavering and not really knowing what his commitment to the Wizards was back in 2021 or 2020, whatever year Russell Westbrook was traded to the Lakers. Forgive me my pandemic blurriness. But whatever offseason that was, after 1 year in Washington, like a lot of Russell Westbrook looking at the Lakers and wanting to be traded to the Lakers was because he was a little concerned that Bradley Beal was going to request out of Washington before him, and he's going to be left holding the bag. So I don't know if this is really going to set the table for a Bradley Beal trade sweepstakes, because he's got a lot of money, like 60 plus million of average annual value coming up, and the only no trade clause in the league, I believe, to my knowledge. So it's not exactly going to be a cut and dry, the Wizard just like put him on the block and sell him to the highest bidder, kind of like how Utah did with Donovan Mitchell last year. He's also a hell of a lot younger than Donovan Mitchell, and he's not considered to be Kevin Durant. So I would think that all those factors, just off the top of my head from early conversations with people, I would think a return for Bradley Beal for Washington would probably be a lot closer on the scale of what the Nets got back for Kyrie Irving than what the Nets got back for Kevin Durant. But like, is that, and I'm just totally spitballing here, this is not a reported, conversation that's even been talked about in the past, but like, if that's who Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson in a first round pick, like, is that something that gets the Wizards excited, or Wizards ownership excited, or just do you turn the page and get younger and just start moving things in a different direction? I don't know what the outcome will be, but I don't know how. Like, I don't think trading Bradley Beal at this juncture, compared to if they did move him before last year's trade deadline, before he signed this massive extension, I think the gap in those two returns, what they could have gotten last February and what they could get this summer, again, if they decide to do this, I'm not saying it's definitively what's going to happen, but if there's a green flag from up top that they can actually explore this in earnest and actually explore a teardown, I think there'd be a lot of support inside, at least from the holdovers that have been there. I don't know what the leadership structure is going to look like. I do know that there's absolutely talk of Michael Winger bringing on a general manager underneath him, who, being that Winger is more of a strategist guy, I think I would fully expect the GM to be more of a scouting talent evaluator guy. And Mark Stein just tweeted it as we've been recording. I heard it last night. Will Dawkins with the Oklahoma City Thunder, who overlapped with Winger there for a while before Winger went to the Clippers, is a name to keep an eye on. There's a lot of other names that have been thrown out in the echo chamber the echo chamber. I don't want to start speculating, but it's going to happen quickly. Like, the draft is coming, and if there's an interview process here, like if Will Dawkins is in an interview process for the Wizards in theory, or like even like being contemplated against other people, like the Thunder and other teams are going to lock out one of their top thought, leaders in that front office from access to meetings and their database and whatever, because we're so close to the draft. So this is going to probably happen quickly. But yeah, I'll end my rant and end my info dump and say to you, Dan, what do you think about the Wizards? And are you excited for this new potential era? Am I I don't know. Like, what do you think are other, best like type of package you can expect for Bradley Beal to come back? Because that's kind of been my read on everything.
Yeah, I think it's understandable that we look at Beal as the first big domino because he's the all NBA talent there, and he's been the standard bearer for a decade there. 29 years old, so you're getting the tail end of his prime if you were to deal for him. But the idea of a sweepstakes at this point, like he's owed $150.6 million over the next 3 years and has let me check here, $57.1 million player option for 26-27, and he'll be 33 years old at that point.
I think he'll take that. I think he'll pick that.
Yeah,
up.
Well, or not, or you're on the hook for like another 4-year re-up at, I don't know, $380 million, whatever the cap's at that point.
He's getting paid a lot of money that season, no matter what.
Yeah, no matter what. And there's the full no trade clause. So you can't just put him somewhere he doesn't want to be if you see that as the best return. So in terms of like the Bradley Beal sweepstakes, good luck with the sweepstakes. I don't know that you're going to get crazy return on that investment. Even if it's, the goodwill component of like send him where he wants to go, that's awesome. But as you say, Michael Winger comes in, does not have the emotional attachment that Tommy Shepard might have to him. Or to anybody in that building, and you mentioned the timing of it, like if they're looking to hire a GM, they're looking to make decisions about who's going to be running the scouting operation, what the sort of day-to-day basketball ops department looks like. The draft is in 4 weeks and free agency is the week after that. And in addition to the Beal thing, the Beal's under contract, so you can theoretically take some time to figure that out. Kristaps Porzingis can exercise a player option. Kyle Kuzma can exercise a player option. Both expected to. You'd figure they're both going to test the unrestricted free agency market.
Kuzma's just straight up said he's going to. Porzingis, after a great year, after being fully, written off by other teams and just as a giant question mark from others from his health concerns, like he's going to try to get the bag too. I fully believe that will happen.
Yeah, so you've got the 8th pick in this draft, which it feels like, is there any pick that feels more appropriate to the Wizards than the 8th pick, where it's like, I don't know, like middle to end of the lottery, who the hell knows? You've got that, and you've got the Porzingis question and the Kuzma question, and how much you want to invest. I think we had talked about it in the past, like the idea of investing $250 million in a big three that you don't even know if it's going to get you into the top 6 in the East. Like, all right, good luck with that. All of which leads to, of course, it makes sense for the Wizards to say at long last, and for Ted Leonsis to say at long last, maybe we need a different way of looking at the way we build this roster. The Wizards have not had a 50-win team or advanced past the second round of the playoffs since 1979. Okay? The franchise has not that was the last time they were in the finals, when they were the Bullets and Dick Motta was the head coach. And, we are
shout out Dick Motta. Shout out Thad Motta. I was going to say Thad Matta.
We could shout out all sorts of people. Shout out Thon McCurr. I don't know. But the point is, here's how long ago that was. I wasn't even alive at that point, and you think I'm your dad and old. So, like, at this point,
I don't think you're my dad. You just so radiate dad energy, and I am nowhere close to being a dad at this stage of my life that it's just, I feel like the contrast is so stark.
Fair enough. Okay. The point being, it's been a long time since the Wizards had a real pathway to consistent 50-win contention, competing in that way. What the pathway is with the current structure, I don't know, but I think that's the point of Ted Leonsis at some point being like, I get, maybe I have to get comfortable with the idea that it might be dire for a few years. And it's weird to think about, like, franchises just kind of continuing to come back to the notion of the process or some variant thereof. I'm not saying that it would be as severe as all that here, or as what Sam Presti did in Oklahoma City, but the notion of, like, in a system where the table is slanted, where the incentive structure is tilted, at a certain point, just trying to be the 8th seed every year is not going to get you anywhere. So if you see the ceiling being those Doug Collins Sixers teams or whatever, or what the Wizards really have been, with the exception of that, like, 1 or 2 Wall Beal healthy years, that's kind of it. Then, the appetite for trying something more dramatic is there. And I think that's sort of what what this portends here. David Aldridge, you mentioned Josh Robbins at The Athletic. David Aldridge, also at The Athletic, had termed it, quote, carte blanche to remake the whole operation from top to bottom, with Leonsis saying he wanted someone who would take big swings in a big market. The idea that DC, and it's the number 8 media market in the country, the idea that DC starts acting like a big market, I think is a pretty interesting. Maybe there's a sleeping giant there, and maybe Michael Winger is the guy to kind of wake it up. TBD, remains to be seen. But yeah, this is one step. What happens with Kuzma? What happens with Porzingis? What happens with that draft pick? And then obviously what happens with Beal? Those are the ones that you really need to see significant progress to be able to believe that the Wizards are going to change their stripes. But this was a necessary first start, getting somebody in there who can, from outside the organization, can take a fresh look at it and say, this is the direction we need to be moving in going forward.
Yeah, someone from a Clippers regime who was very, very involved. I mean, he was general manager of the team underneath the president, Lawrence Frank. So has a past of exhibiting in like a 2-tiered structure where he's working alongside a talent evaluator type guy.
Former head coach, a guy, you do the X's and O's, I'll be the one managing the cap and the strategy and that kind of stuff going forward. And that relationship seems like it might be a structure that works.
Yeah, a lot of interesting moves on their docket. You could look at the Kawhi, Paul George, mega strike. Even like that Norm Powell, Robert Covington kind of steal, I think, at the trade deadline last year. Just interesting optionality upcoming. Let's keep it moving here because we are running out of time. Here's my original report as of 1:31. We'll see if it gets scooped. The Pistons have narrowed down their coaching search to 2. Kevin Ollie and Charles Lee. No more Jaron Collins of the New Orleans Pelicans, an assistant there. Ollie has long been discussed and talked about and positioned as the favorite of general manager Troy Weaver. Charles Lee, the Bucks assistant, who I believe has, from all my conversations, has a greater footing and more support than Ollie does from other voices in the organization. Ollie's meeting Thursday. Charles Lee is meeting on Friday. This is both back in LA after those two guys and Jaron Collins both went out before the combine to Los Angeles. Then the Pistons went after Monty Williams. Now they're down to 2. So, the Wizards finally name a GM. I think the Pistons will finally have their coaching decision very, very shortly here. I think the Bucks are going to be next. The Bucks are meeting with people in New York, from what I was told, and there definitely is supposed to be some component of meeting with Giannis Antetokounmpo. I was talking to someone from the first round of the Bucks search that was like well over a dozen people who did not make the final round, and this person was saying to me, just get me a meeting with Giannis. Like, get me that meeting with Giannis. So,
right.
I think that's going to be a pretty critical factor here. They're down to Nick Nurse, Kenny Atkinson, Adrian Griffin. I mean, before we recorded, Drew Holiday, I saw on Twitter, said to another podcast, I don't remember who the podcast was, I apologize, but that like Nick Nurse might not seem like the nicest person all the time, but you don't necessarily need that if you're a good coach. So, it's not hard for Bucks players to call Raptors players and like figure out why some of those relationships were strained by the end of it. But I say that to say, like, I kind of am expecting, if Nick Nurse wants that job and if Giannis is on board, like, I think he is clearly the candidate of the 3 there between Adrian Griffin and himself and Kenny Atkinson that has won the title before. And this is the overall thing that the Bucks are trying to accomplish as Giannis Antetokounmpo is approaching another contract extension. Phoenix and Philly and Toronto, those are all tough to call right now and tough to handicap. They're a lot more in the earlier stages, but we'll keep you updated on that stuff with more notebooks and whatnot at Yahoo Sports. So to bring it to a close, we've got a couple of things that I guess we're calling hot Jakes. Could we get like a drop or something so I don't have to announce it? That'd be great. Have Dan saying say it, and mix some other sound effects, like maybe like a swishing of the net, and yeah, there you go.
You're creating all this work for our producers. Come on, man. It's not just say the words hot Jakes. Come on.
I don't want to say it. I hate it.
All right. Go.
But
deliver the Jakes. Don't worry about the terminology. Just deliver the Jakes.
Here's the first take. Everyone complaining about why Denver and Miami is going to be a boring finals matchup and the ratings are going to be bad and they're not big enough markets. To me, I think it's pretty ironic that, at least in Denver's circumstance, we'll see how the Miami series continues. but like the Nuggets waxing the Lakers so swiftly and like being so obviously the Titanic favorite and being like clearly the best team in the Western Conference from start to finish this year, like it kind of had an inverse effect of the Nuggets hype train, being that like if it was a dramatic game 7 where Jokic is doing this and doing that every single night for 2 weeks with the back against the wall and blah, 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 like maybe like the compelling nature of their march to the title would have had more time for people to get on the bandwagon. But like they've been so good and so dominant, like it's been happening in a blink of an eye. All of a sudden they're in the finals and they haven't had a chance for all these people to jump on board. Like, you see what I'm saying? I feel like it's kind of like a catch-22 where people are saying like, oh, they're like, no one knows anything about them. Like they're not nearly as exciting as the Lakers because they just beat the Lakers so quickly. Like the casuals didn't have time to learn that the Nuggets are this good.
Well, the good news about that is that we've got a couple of weeks to reheat the stories that you and I have been writing all season about the Nuggets and to make sure that everybody's aware of what led them to this point. I think it's funny to say like they just haven't had enough time to get to know, for everybody to get to know them, because they waxed the Wolves. They beat like rookie or number 1 star rookie kind of guy Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns. They waxed them. They just they took apart the Suns with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, and they annihilated the Lakers with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. They've beaten an all-NBA team to get to this point, and we're like, but there's just not really much to hang your hat on. Not about the 2-time MVP who was like a chubby kid that drank 3 liters of Coke a day and was introduced to the league through a case.
That's not a joke.
It's not a joke. That's a legit.
That is what happened. He was a fat little kid who drank way too much soda. That is
like what, and was introduced to the NBA through a Taco Bell commercial. What can America latch onto more readily than a fat kid who drinks too much soda and eats too much Taco Bell? And this is the guy who's now in the finals. Like the Jamal Murray story of like he got to was about to sort of reach a new level and laid low by an injury, has the grueling comeback, the like training montage to get back to it. And then aces the Western Conference Finals, 32 points a game on 50, 40, 90 shooting. Like, there's something to latch onto there. Michael Porter Jr., back injuries, multiple surgeries, goes from number 1 prospect to like can't get back on the floor. And is he ever going to be able to be doing it? And now his coach didn't trust him because he couldn't play defense. Now he's doing it and willing to sacrifice for the good of the team. All these things, like there's plenty of stories, and I look forward to us telling them and other people in our positions telling them rather than complaining that there's not enough to talk about. There's plenty to talk about. You just got to do it well. And if we do our job, if we do our jobs well, then there will be people who will pay attention to it.
And Dan, most of all, you are still going to the finals, correct?
I am. I don't know where. I'm not sure where I'm going to be and when I'm going to be there yet, but I'll be there.
If you're there for games 1 and 2, you will get to witness the Nuggets rave in person. That's what I'm most excited about.
I haven't yet pitched to Garza and Joanna, our wonderful editors. I haven't yet pitched me rolling while being there, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't know if I can expense drugs, but I think we're going to find out.
I mean, it was a total upset victory that you said that and not me. Okay. The other hot Jake.
If I'm on the road for a couple of weeks and no kids in around, let's get nuts. Let's go and let's get ourselves involved.
So a lot of people got involved in debating the merits of Carmelo Anthony throughout his playing career. I see in our rundown you might have had a different experience than me, but I will tell you my experience when he announced his retirement, I believe on Monday this week. The whole timeline that I saw and the conversations that I have people in my life were just nothing but effusive praise. And when it really was time, like we spent all this time debating people's legacy and what this game means for their legacy and legacy. When someone retires and their career is quite literally coming to an end, that is when it's truly appropriate to discuss someone's legacy to me. And when it comes time to do that, seems like everyone, sure, is he a Hall of Famer? Should his jersey be retired? All that type of stuff. But like, everyone's like, man, Carmelo was awesome. What a sad day. Not a sad day, a celebratory day of like, oh, we're not going to get to see Carmelo play basketball anymore. And I think of these highlights and remember this game and remember that series and Olympic Melo and Hoodie Melo and Melo. 3 fingers to the dome. Like, it was nice to the point where it also made me sad thinking, why do we have to do all this other mumbo jumbo before when it comes time to actually discuss the legacy? It's not like hurtful and argumentative and like a challenge of my basketball acumen versus yours. I'm hoping, I'm coming to you, Dan, and to our listeners and the public, begging and pleading, can we take like the Carmelo retirement discussion and kind of use that to reshape how we discuss and characterize the arcs of these guys' careers, knowing that we're going to get to an endpoint. If the guy's awesome when he retires, we're just going to all celebrate how awesome he was.
So I think I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that we should take at the end, Carmelo was awesome energy and like bring that into the stations of his career, as opposed to like the hemming and hawing and the rending of garments about whether,
Correct.
He's the right kind of good, or okay, that's totally, I'm on board for that. Like, I think that multiple things can be true. You can, in the course of somebody's career, you can evaluate what you're seeing and you can say, this person is maybe not as conducive to winning as other people are. Their style of play makes it a little bit trickier to build around them. Their level of efficiency at X, Y, or Z is not, it's going to make lower the ceiling of their teams, stuff like that. Especially, I mean, the story of each season is a run to a championship, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's reasonable to have watched Carmelo Anthony over the course of his career and been like, well, the part where he won't play the four is making it harder to maximize his team. The part where he's dominating and kind of pounding the rock in the mid-range as the game shifted to be more of a layups and threes analytics movement, like that's going to make it a little bit tougher to build the offense around him. His defensive weaknesses make it tougher to build a defense around him. He's an arguably talented player that can be a tricky piece to build a championship team around. The evidence of that is that there was never a championship team built around him, right?
Just my thing is to start that with, or end that with, but Melo's awesome.
He was awesome. Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I think that's completely fair. And so, yes. And one of the things that pissed me off about this, and I try not to get overly emotionally invested in this kind of conversation, but like that it immediately turned into, I think it was ESPN had the social graphic that was like, which 15 should the Nuggets retire? It's like, why at this moment do we need to be like, oh man, well, I guess Carmelo Anthony wasn't as good as Nikola Jokic. Like, sure, okay, fine. But like, who cares? Carmelo Anthony retires as the 9th leading scorer in NBA history. He got the Nuggets to the Western Conference Finals. This is a team that has never won a championship, had never been to a finals before. He got them as close as they had previously ever been.
And if Trevor Ariza doesn't just snatch a couple of sidelines out of bounds, inbound passes, maybe they're there. Maybe they make it. Who knows? Yeah,
and like that, there are moments throughout his career that you can suggest, like, well, this is an indication of where he falls short in the like pantheon of all-time greatest players. Like, yeah, if the greatest failing you can have, or the greatest slight you can level against Carmelo Anthony is like he's not one of the 15 greatest players of all time. Well, you know what? A whole lot of other guys aren't either. But he's, I think, one of the 75 greatest players ever. A sure thing, first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the 10 most highest volume scorers of all time, one of the most natural scorers in the history of the game, pure hooper, all that kind of stuff. Like, and a guy who didn't carry the exact same weight and burden as LeBron James over the course of their entire time, but not far off and not much lighter, and bore it pretty significantly and strongly and well for 20 years. Like that this turned into, for a lot of people, a salute and a reason for outpouring of fond feelings and, remembrances of that player, made me really happy, because during his tenure, especially in New York, there was a lot of like, is he the right guy? Is he worth the squeeze? All that kind of stuff. And that's fine. I understood some of that, but like when the guy's on the way out the door, I think it's reasonable to say that's one of the best basketball players I ever saw play. And maybe that's not true for, a lot of people, but it's true for me. And so Carmelo Anthony on the way out the door. Yeah, I think that's fair. Ending all of those, this, if this, then that, and whatever with, but he was awesome. I think that's a great place to end it.
Yeah. Like right now, last thing I'll say, as all my Philly people are like out on Joel Embiid, he's still awesome. He might not have what it takes to be the number one guy, or the things might not have aligned yet to get out of the second round, but he's still awesome. You're awesome, Dan. John Gennaro behind the glass. Thank you for everything you do. You are awesome. That is going to do it for us on this episode of No Cap Room on the Ball Don't Lie podcast network. If you're still on Twitter, which it still exists, please follow us there. My handle is at Jake L. Fisher. That is at Your Man Divine. You can subscribe to the Ball Don't Lie feed on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you're currently listening on. And please give us a 5-star review like I just did last week.
You hadn't rated the podcast. We've been doing it for months and you hadn't.
Hey, we can't all be perfect. Vince Goodwill will be back on Monday with another episode of Good Word with Goodwill. And then we've got Kristen Peak. I don't think we've addressed this yet on our show. Every Wednesday, bringing some great NBA draft analysis. And so far, a lot of particular stuff on Victor Wembanyama. So she's coming out every Wednesday between now and June 22nd when we do see Wembanyama come out and shake Adam Silver's hand. But for now, that's it for us. We thank you for listening, and we'd appreciate it if you came back next week for another episode of No Cap Room.